In today's video, we're going to be talking about this, the Pentax 17, which is Pentax's most recent release. They sent me this camera a little while back, just before it was released to the public, and I have been testing it for the last couple of months and trying to run through as much film as I can to really get an overview good enough to be able to make this video. So by this point, you've probably heard loads about this camera, and that is for good reason. It is Pentax's first release in recent years. And if you don't already know a bit about the Pentax film project, they have been documenting it on their YouTube. I'm going to link that in the description. But essentially they wanted to use the expertise that Pentax has acquired over, decades of making film cameras, of being an industry leader in creating film cameras, and make sure that that was applied in the modern age, so that that kind of like knowledge that has been, as I say, acquired throughout Pentax years of doing this wasn't lost and is continued to be passed down through generations of people making film cameras, people enjoying film cameras. And because you've probably heard loads about this camera, I'm not going to delve too much into the details of the camera and all of the technical specifications, because you probably already know that this is a fixed focal length half frame camera, and there are a lot of other creators out there who will tell you more about the technical details of this camera. This is more about my personal experience with the camera, what I think it has been good for in my experience, what I think I will continue to use it for, and what I think of certain features such as the refocusing system. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about what I think this release means for kind of the wider film photography scene in general. On screen, I'm going to flick through a ton of different photos that I've taken using this camera across different film stocks, so that you can get hopefully a good variety of images as we're talking about this camera, and you can see how I've used it in live music, in portraiture, and in documentary. And I would say that this camera for me is probably best designed for that kind of use of documenting everyday life, almost like a bit of a behind the scenes camera. For me, I probably wouldn't opt to use this camera over other 35mm cameras, over medium format cameras, over even digital cameras, if it came to serious client work where quality and reliability are really key. That being said, I think if you're a street photographer, if you're a travel photographer, if you do that kind of more documentary style photography, that fly on the wall kind of photography, then this camera is a really solid option for you. It took me a long while to be able to shoot enough film to make this video, because as you guys will know if you follow this channel already, I come from more of a background working in medium format film. And with medium format film, you will get anywhere from 10 photos upwards to 15 photos. So with a half frame camera, you're going to get double the amount of exposures using 35mm film. So therefore, if you have a 24 frame roll of film, you're going to get 48. If you have 36, you're going to get 72, and so on. So getting through that number of photos, just getting through one roll, that's why I kind of didn't rush this review and try and get it out on the embargo date. And it was more of a longer project for me to really find my feet and get to grips with it. I do think as a documentary fly on the wall kind of camera, it is a great camera. As you can see from it, it is really small and lightweight. This bag here is my moment bag that I wear kind of like over my body when I'm shooting, especially when I'm shooting at things like gigs and festivals, which has been, of course, we're bang in the middle of festival season, it has been where I've been at most of the time. And this camera fits so nicely, like there's plenty more room in this bag, even when the camera's in here. So it's been great for me to kind of just throw it in my bag and then shoot around the jobs that I'm already doing. So whether that be at festivals, whether that be behind the scenes on other kinds of shoots, or just generally as I'm kind of making my way around the city, wherever I am. The form factor definitely lends itself to that kind of photography. And I think that the fact that it's also half frame also lends itself to that, because you have, that many more frames. As you can see, it has these little icons on here. Let me focus it. It has these little icons on here to help you understand roughly where you are focusing. So if you look on the underneath side, there are actual measurements so that if you don't want to look at the icons. I do think that the icon system is really useful because ideally you should be able to look at these icons and tell the distance of where something is by identifying the icon, and that's really helpful if you can't maybe tell how long a meter and a half is or something like that. In terms of metering, there is a built-in meter and I have found it to be vastly accurate. For the most part, I haven't had any problems, although I have started to just set on the exposure compensation dial just a quarter stop overexposed, just because I personally would rather a camera work out the settings to overexpose my shots than it would underexpose my shots. So that is just personal preference, but I have found that majority of the time it is a pretty accurate meter. I haven't ended up with, a ton of mismatched exposures or anything like that. In terms of the viewfinder, I really like it. I think it's quite sharp, it's quite bright, and sometimes I find with rangefinders or similar cameras, such as the Fuji GA645, for example, I find those to be somewhat confusing to look through and to frame my shots, whereas this I find it's a lot easier. I think because maybe the proximity of the viewfinder to the lens is so close, and also it's quite a big viewfinder. You'll also notice, as I'm sure you've already been made aware, that this camera has a portrait viewfinder. So this isn't something that I am too unfamiliar with. As I did say, I shoot a lot on the Fuji GA645, which has a similar viewfinder system of it being portrait. I think this is quite clever. It's quite intentional given the kind of age in which we use social media and most people post in portrait. I've definitely found myself more drawn to shooting portraits because of this, as in portrait orientation, not actual portraits. But there's also something about discouraging me from taking a landscape photo, which feels strange because I don't get that with the Fuji GA645. I've never really had that kind of feeling as though I've been put off taking a landscape photo, but this just doesn't feel right when I'm trying to take it, when I'm trying to hold it like this. It just doesn't feel natural to me in the same way as it does shooting portrait. So I've definitely taken more portrait orientation photos than landscape, but of course that is the design and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, especially because I think that this is a camera that is very well positioned in terms of introducing people who are new to film photography to photography, and I do think it does a good job of that. It's simple to understand, the controls are really easy to understand, whether that be the zone focusing system, whether that be the actual, the setting. You can put it on that little moon icon, and that essentially means that it's going to prioritize shutter speed, but it tells you that in a much more visual way that people can understand, even if you don't know what shutter speed is, for example. And also even down to the fact that if it's in the yellow, let me show you. If it's in the yellow, that means the flash is going to be on, and if it's not, if it's in the white, then the flash is not going to be triggered. So things like that, I think they make it really easy and useful. In terms of the flash, speaking of the flash, I think the flash is really powerful. I've used it a few times and I actually really like it. It's nice to kind of have a flash built into a camera. Not many of my cameras have that built in, and the positioning of the flash also I think is quite nice and quite flattering. Going back to these little icons, one thing I will say is that they are very easy to knock out of place. So you will be able to hear, let me put it near the mic, you can hear the click as I'm changing between the modes, but I do notice that because it's where the film winder is, so the lever's there, as I go to change the lever, sometimes I do knock that dial and change the mode without noticing. So I would say that that is one thing that maybe could be improved, is how easy it is to knock that little dial. I also found loading the film a little bit tricky at first. It just didn't really feel as though it was kind of fitting into catching on to the little clip things inside the camera, but I am the first one to admit that I'm terrible at loading 35mm film, so that again could be user error. I'm finding it a lot easier now. I think I was overthinking it at first, but it does seem to be a lot easier now. I think it has been positioned really nicely as kind of a beginner camera. One thing that I maybe would disagree with, not necessarily disagree with, but have questions over, is the price point. So I've seen that it's marketed at around 500 Great British pounds, which for me, as a camera that probably is ideal for a beginner photographer, or someone that just wants to use it as kind of like a everyday documentary camera, I think that that is maybe a little bit steep. That being said, I do also understand on the flip side that, you know, it's a new development and they've kind of, you know, they've got to find their money from somewhere, and also it's, you know, the start of hopefully a journey of more manufacturers creating film cameras, and therefore hopefully the price will be reflected in that as time goes on. But that would probably be one of my main kind of negative points when it comes to this camera. But to summarize, I really like the form factor. I like how small it is. I like how light it is. I've seen criticism over people saying that it feels cheap, and I would disagree. It feels really solid to me. Although it is small and light, it's compact for sure. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart. It feels nice. It's nice to hold, and it feels like it's been designed well. Other pros, you get more, you know, more film, more photos, more exposures, which is great in a landscape where film is getting more expensive. And I think, again, that is where you can see that this might be positioned towards someone who is new to film photography or using it as an everyday camera, because it does make shooting film that, well, literally half price. So yeah, I mean, there is that. I'll definitely be using this camera more. It's definitely one that fits really nicely within my workflow, documenting my life, documenting behind the scenes on my jobs, and just having, you know, a little film camera on me at all times. I really do enjoy it. I really do like shooting with it. And you will definitely be seeing more from this camera on this channel. But as ever, I hope you've enjoyed my ramblings on this newest Pentax camera, and also the photos that you've seen like going on throughout this video. It's been a little while since I've had time to sit down and shoot a video and upload a video. You guys will know that I've been missing from YouTube for over a month now, and that is because I've been working on so many amazing things, and I do have lots of things that are going to come to the channel soon. I just need the time to kind of sit down and film it and get it all out for you guys. But a big thank you to Pentax for sending me the Pentax 17 and for making such a great camera that I think will really have a positive effect on kind of the film photography industry and community as a whole. But also to you guys for watching today's video. I will see you in the next one.